For the 10 plus years that LittleBigPlanet speedrunning has been active for, you can be sure that there have been more than a few jokes, rumours and myths created within the community that are still relevant today, or have been forgotten about throughout the years. So in this video, I'm going to be doing my best in explaining all of these topics which have been put together by everyone in the speedrunning server. There's been others that have explained the mysteries of the LBP series, but none that have gone into the speedrunning side of things, as much of this is known almost exclusively within the community. So here is the LittleBigPlanet speedrunning iceberg. Boomtown skip. This refers to a trick that speedrunners use in the LBP 1 level Boomtown, which skips the infamous bomb carrying section that many players have been known to struggle with. The skip involves landing on the collector using a scorpion, to then get out of bounds so you can walk to the scoreboard. This is a pretty well known trick. Prize crown is faster. Known by many players, the prize crown costume piece is meant to be a rare item that players only receive by being awarded with it by a developer of the game. There's a joke within the speedrunning community that wearing the costume actually makes your character run faster, giving an advantage over other players. However, this isn't true. The crown is purely for cosmetics. Wheel of Death skip. Similar to Boomtown, the LBP 1 level The Bunker is known for having one of the most difficult sections of the entire game, appropriately named by players as the Wheel of Death. However, possibly unknown to many, there are actually several different ways to skip the wheel completely that are easier than going through the obstacle, which speedrunners also use in runs. Some ways to skip it involve jumping off the scientist, doing a co-op jump or lever fling, jumping from the enemy, or even partly removing the collision of the wheel. Overlord. Overlord is an exploit found across many of the games in the series, which allows certain things to be attached to Sackboy, such as emitters and other tools. This allows players to bring any item they want into any level, allowing for high scores to be cheated or to finish any level instantly, which is what speedrunners use in any percent speedruns. It works because for a brief moment as they're spawning, Sackboy is a part of the checkpoint, allowing things to be placed on them like any other object. It was later patched in an LBP 2 update though. Bravery test skip. The LBP 2 level bravery test is known for having its scoreboard right next to the entrance, only to trick players who run towards it by having a wall appear, making them play the level normally. But known to many, it's possible to use two players doing a co-op jump to completely jump over the wall, finishing the level in seconds. Styrofoam percent. Styrofoam percent is an LBP 1 speedrun category extension, which takes place entirely within the Meerkat Kingdom. The goal is to take this piece of polyester from the race section and drag it through the rest of the level until finishing with it. This is possible since the route for the Meerkat Kingdom takes place entirely within the front layer, and the styrofoam can actually be pulled through any checkpoints that get in the way. Currently the speedrunner Crosso holds the record with 2 minutes and 29 seconds. 5602 Run. This simply refers to an LBP 1 speedrun that runner RBG Jellyfish accomplished in 56 minutes and 2 seconds, which appears as one of the first results when searching for LBP speedrunning on YouTube, meaning it's likely many people's main association with the community. LBP 3 No Marbles. Across LittleBigPlanet 3, there's a total of 8 marbles that are used to unlock the 3 additional characters that are used throughout the game. But not surprisingly, it's been found that it's actually possible to gain access to the characters and progress through the game without needing to collect the marbles at all, which gets used in any percent no create speedruns. Deloads. Deloading is a relatively new speedrunning trick, which was discovered by complete accident around the beginning of 2021, when the runner Frit had paused his game at the beginning of Boomtown in LBP 1, only to come back sometime later to find that the collision of the heart object had been partially removed. It caused the discovery of deloads. When a player happens to despawn as they're coming out of a checkpoint, it effectively also despawns part of the object it's glued to, resulting in some of its collision being removed. It works for the same reason that Overlord does, and in speedruns, it's used to finish the Meerkat Kingdom in only a few seconds, as well as some other smaller skips. It is possible in some other games, but there aren't really many uses for it. Shortly after this was found, another player named Kadiwa found the collision can also be reloaded back, resulting in a skip for Skate to Victory being found, and a few other smaller things. Mag's legs. In the level Lowrider in LBP 1 towards the end, the story character Mags is sitting down with her legs hanging in front. Players found that standing and grabbing onto them in the right ways can have interesting results, which usually involves being violently flung around. It's only ever been shown and legitimately done once, but player Sad was actually able to use this to fly over the rest of the level, landing at the scoreboard. Speedrunners are still yet to replicate this and set a time with it, just because of how chaotic it is. Brocenter's AGDQ run. Brocenter is known to be the first player to take LBP speedrunning seriously, with doing full game runs of it, and in 2012, it was even run at AGDQ. However, even for how underdeveloped speedrunning was for it back then, it was still quite slow and mostly a casual run. Starskip. Within the speedrunning community, LBP1's Great Magician's Palace is known for having a certain skip always being rediscovered by less experienced players. By getting into the back layer, it's possible to jump off of this star to get over the wall, skipping a considerable amount of the next section. Because of how long it takes to do though, it's faster to do a different skip later on by jumping off this block in the right way. LBPK difficulty setting. In LittleBigPlanet karting, there's a setting that lets players choose the difficulty of the game, the two options being casual and normal. Rather than this being an actual difficulty setting that would just alter the CPU players or something else, choosing casual actually changes the max speed that you can drive at and removes some of the strategies that can be used for speed preservation, making the normal difficulty setting much faster. LBP1 has RNG. Because of the chaotic and unpredictable nature of LittleBigPlanet's physics engine, whether jokingly or not, players often mistaken this for RNG, meaning aspects of the game are random and literally unpredictable. However, when it comes to the physics, it is actually all purely deterministic and not a result of randomness, as stated by a developer in a tweet. Many failed speedruns have been blamed on poor RNG, when in reality this isn't the cause. The Sackbot Redemption IL. In LittleBigPlanet 2, for whatever reason, every single level had an individual level speedrun time set for it, except for the Sackbot Redemption, until August of 2022, where player Ads submitted its first world record with a time of 1 hour, 16 minutes and 27 seconds, despite it only being a 4-minute level. In their submission video, Ads can be seen playing games such as Osu Mania and Plants vs Zombies while sitting in the level and doing nothing. Later on, the player Hyperfied also submitted a time, getting second place with 3 hours, 36 minutes and 27 seconds. Lucky Dip 10. Lucky Dip 10 is a speedrunning challenge which involves getting 10 random community levels from LittleBigPlanet's Lucky Dip function and completing them as fast as possible. It's based on the 100 Mario challenge from Super Mario Maker, with Ads holding the record with 18 minutes and 7 seconds. Thankfully, runs can still be done with custom servers, even though the original ones were shut down for the PS3. Gustavo Fling. Many movement tricks within the LBP speedrunning community are referred to as flings because of how Sackboy moves around when doing them, such as Croc Fling or Lever Fling. The Gustavo Fling is a particular trick performed using two people that allows for great horizontal momentum to be achieved, mostly being used on long straightaways. It's named after the popular character from the Breaking Bad series, Gustavo Fring, purely because of how similar Fling and Fring sound together, and nothing else. Tutorial Glitch. Tutorial Glitch refers to a bug in LittleBigPlanet 2 that was present until the release of the cross-controller pack. The glitch allows the player to reset which checkpoint in the level is activated, where then dying would allow you to spawn from that different checkpoint, possibly later in the level, but it's only useful in two places. By unlocking a sticker from a create mode tutorial, you have the option to replay that tutorial from the details page of that sticker, even when in a regular level. So to do the glitch, you start a tutorial while in story mode, and then simply leave the tutorial, causing a different checkpoint to activate when you return. This is currently useful in Foul Play and Into the Heart of the Negativatron, where in both levels, the trick essentially warps you straight to the end when done in the right spot. It would be useful anyway, if it wasn't banned. Tutorial Glitch was ultimately deemed a create mode glitch, leading to the category Any% No Overlord being renamed to Any% No Create, so that it can't be used. There is a category extension that allows for it though. The Mines Deload. The Mines in LBP1 has been one of the most sought out levels for a skip because of how it's the longest level in the game. As an April Fool's joke, the runner Crosso set up a fake skip involving a deload in the mines by altering the level in create mode, which fooled a few people since deloading was still new at the time, making the trick believable. However, no major skip has ever been found yet. Got the Hump skip. Another super long level that's in desperate need of a skip is LBP2's Got the Hump. Except for this one, there's actually some potential. The level consists of a 6-minute auto-scroller, piloting a camel to shoot down enemies. In a random run that came from the player Retro, for some reason when reaching a stopping point, the camel just kept on walking, but ended up flipping over and dying, which lost time, but it showed the possibility of a skip. Then shortly after, the runner FireTheiff experienced the same error of the camel walking onto the elevator without stopping, but was able to act fast enough for it to save time. It's unknown what the cause for the camel continuing to walk is, so it isn't being used in runs yet. LCJs are a patch. An LCJ is a common speedrunning trick that stands for left corner jump, which lets Sackboy get an extended jump when timing it properly with changing the layer onto a left corner, which works across many of the games. It's lesser known, however, that this trick wasn't actually possible until it was introduced in the version 1.21 patch for LBP1, where it would then be used for many speedrunning tricks. Subway skip single LCJ. In the LBP1 level Subway, there's a well-known skip that avoids practically the entire level and is done by doing a double LCJ from the boxes at the start to reach the top of this lamp. Before this method was being done though, the main way of doing this trick involved only a single LCJ off a different arrangement of boxes, shown here by RBD Jellyfish. This way of doing the skip isn't very well known, and is extremely outdated. LBP. LBP is an alternate pronunciation of the acronym LBP, which came from a series of unusual stream titles from the two players Frit and Crosso. It started when Crosso accidentally named a stream Practice for Practice Players, where Frit then continued to use nonsensical titles until leading to straight up misinterpretations of names, such as calling LittleBigPlanet Little Plant. From here, Crosso began saying LBP, as being from Sweden it was how LBP was pronounced, and it soon became a known joke within the community. This is also how the two popular phrases from the community, Yump and PPA, originated. It wouldn't be too long after where another player, Night Carries, would create an entire rap and music video dedicated to LBP speedrunning, which was titled LBP. Be warned that it is explicit if you decide to watch it. Speedrunners versus hard level players. Also within the LBP community as a whole, there are the hard level players, who create excruciatingly difficult community levels, only for the most dedicated and skilled to beat. These levels use a lot of the same movement tricks that are used in speedrunning, but because of the two communities being mostly disconnected, different names were naturally given for each trick, such as a left corner jump being called a quad jump instead for hard level players. This led to some drama over what the true names for the tricks were that everyone was using, until speedrunners started using totally ridiculous names to make fun of the hard level terms, like calling RCJs big jumps, LCJs really big jumps, and calling trip jumps falling asleep and waking back up again jumps, because of how Sackboy falls over when doing these. ESA disaster. The ESA disaster comes from when Crosso ran LBP1 at the European Speedrunner Assembly event. When in the level Lowrider, Crosso managed to get one of the drivable cars almost completely stuck for over an entire minute, which is normally needed to progress to the end. Even after finally getting it unstuck, Crosso was still underneath the car, needing to halt to retry to get out, ultimately losing over an entire minute and 20 seconds to something that's so easily avoidable, at a public event no less. Apparently the chat was even spamming the ayaya emote, again because of Crosso's pronunciations. Old intro skip. LBP1 speedruns today do a trick to completely skip the introduction by spawning additional players again and again until getting a game over, letting them return to the pod to start the next level. Before this was discovered though, the only way to skip this level with a single player was to do a precise trip jump into this gap where it's actually possible to get yourself crushed. Doing this 4 times in a row would bring up the game over screen, skipping the level. Thankfully the newer method is a lot easier and faster, leading to the old way being forgotten. RSBR 100%. Run Sackboy Run is an endless runner mobile game from 2014 that features several collectible items as well as purchasable items using in-game currency or with microtransactions. It's vastly different than any other entry in the series, and it isn't super popular. But the runner Hoon still completed a 100% speedrun of it in 1 hour, 54 minutes and 19 seconds. The run basically involves purchasing a ton of microtransactions to get as many bubbles as needed to purchase everything, which is possible to do without any real money using Lucky Patcher, and then proceeding by trying to get all of the collectibles that randomly appear across the game. Elephant Temple ×2 area. In LittleBigPlanet speedrunning, the most problematic multiplayer area in the game is Elephant Temple's 2-player minigame, or at least it was. Up until 2021, there was still a category on the LittleBigPlanet speedrun page that had been left empty, and that was 100% No Overlord, which involves completely finishing the story mode without any create mode exploits and with only one controller. Obviously the biggest challenge that comes with this is only having one controller, since the multiplayer areas rely on multiple players to complete, but most of them aren't actually very hard, since you are still allowed to change controller numbers to complete the run, letting runners control several sack people, one at a time, with one controller. This let all of the multiplayer areas be completed with relative ease, except one, Elephant Temples. The door to it only opens when both of these sponges are being grabbed at the same time, which isn't possible to do with one controller, since when you switch to grab the other sponge, the other stops grabbing. There was an alternative, however, which was taking a ridiculous route out of bounds while constantly switching between the two players until reaching this point, where if a player grabbed the other at the perfect time as they were falling down, they could block the layer change onto the platform below to fall behind the wall, where it can then be easily completed with one sack person. All of this was just too difficult to do in an actual run though, and no one had ever even done it legitimately before, so it seems like a 100% run would never be completed. That is, until Frit noticed that the checkpoint attached to the moving elephant is actually in the back layer for some reason, and the wall next to it isn't. Using this, Frit was able to break into the two-player area easier than ever before by spawning another player to come out of the checkpoint, grabbing them briefly to move into the back layer, then simply holding left and fire boosting down into the area, making the hardest trick of the run one of the easiest. LBP PSP 2x Speed. 2x Speed is a category extension for the PSP release of LittleBigPlanet, which involves setting an emulator to double speed so the game runs twice as fast, since this game is run primarily on emulators. There's only one run of it, and it's by Frit, who used LBP2 splits and got a time of 1 hour, 11 minutes and 46 seconds, which is actually slower than the world record run at regular speed, which has a time of 58 minutes and 18 seconds by Crosso. DBP walking his dog. At one point on the leaderboard, there was a time by player DBP, who mid-run went and walked their dog, only to return to finish the run off later, getting a time of 2 hours, 23 minutes and 59 seconds. The Steam group. Before Discord or any kind of server existed, anyone who was interested in early LBP speedrunning gathered in a Steam group that was dedicated to it. The group still exists and it currently contains 28 members. After the Steam group, there was also a couple of Skype group chats, until eventually moving to the Discord server that's used today. High and Pro only skips. This again comes from more interactions with the hard level community, who often give rankings to players based on their perceived skill level. Titles can include Pro, High-End, and High-End Pro. Speedrunners took this in a joking manner by then saying that many difficult speedrunning tricks are for high-end pros only, since it can be difficult to justify someone's skill to a single rank with a name. 5-player SPM run. Sackboy's Prehistoric Moves is a short series of levels that utilizes the PS Move controller. Due to how small the game is, there's no option to play online, making multiplayer speedruns a bit of a hassle to set up. However, at a particular ESA event, runners RBD Jellyfish, FireTheiff, PPJ, Duck and Duck, and Jelly all got together to accomplish a 5-player speedrun world record of Prehistoric Moves, with Jelly using the Move controller and the rest with DualShocks. Because of the lack of online, it's thought that this record is unbeatable due to the fact that most runners live so far away from each other. Snaking is faster. I believe this comes from a misconception about the movement used in LittleBigPlanet karting, where at some point it was thought that snaking, or drift chaining, was a faster way to move than just power sliding. As it turns out, even without the mini turbo, power sliding is a much faster way to travel than snaking, where snaking should really only be used to realign for something. Guy on the right. For AGDQ 2016, RBD Jellyfish was able to run LBP1 for it, with PPJ commentating, getting a time of 1 hour and 50 seconds. Throughout the entire run though, PPJ sat still without saying a word, with his hands clenched for most of it, except for when RBD handed him the controller to run Skulldozer. Probably with English not being PPJ's first language, it was easier to let RBD explain everything. This caught the attention of the Twitch chat though, who then began referring to PPJ as Guy on the right. Liam is 12. There's a fairly well-known joke within the speedrunning community that one of the runners who has formerly held the world record for LBP1, Liam, is actually only 12 years old and always will be. This purely comes from the fact that when Liam first joined LBP speedrunning, he he was only 11, but has now become a significant part of the community. FireTheiff is Bean. Within the speedrunning Discord for LittleBigPlanet, there's a bot for doing races between players named BingoBot, which displays the runner's Discord name on its leaderboard. At some point FireTheiff must have changed their name to Bean, and the bot started using it, but even today the name is still there on the leaderboards, despite FireTheiff changing it since then. PPY. The player PPJ was one of the first major runners for the LittleBigPlanet community, first taking the world record in 2014 and discovering many major skips. In an old video of PPJ's, they are seen with another mysterious player using the name PPY, who some people may have thought was an alter ego of PPJ or something, I'm not sure. But as PPJ explained, PPY is another account that they created, which is what their friend is using in that video. The account was probably created to gain access to another region's PSN store. PSI Gang. The PSI is a small camera which could plug into a PS3 that only a handful of games utilized. In LittleBigPlanet, it can be used to take pictures and use them as stickers. The PSI Gang refers to the group of players who don't have a capture card, who instead use the PSI pointed at their screen to record their speedruns. The player WeGoKD is known for doing this. Bob Wilson 2007. Several years ago, the player Liam was once banned briefly from the speedrunning community for repeatedly lying about his personal best times. Shortly after being banned, a new user joined the community using the name Bob Wilson 2007. It was quickly found that this was in fact Liam. Years later though, Liam is now a moderator of the Discord server, using the name Bob Wilson 2007. Fake Crosso. A few times in the past there have been speedrunning contests held within the community, the winner of which would be awarded with the prize crown costume piece. After Crosso won the first contest, an unknown user impersonated him in an attempt to steal his prize crown from the LBP community manager. A runner named Slens was banned after being accused and having evidence for the impersonation, until it was later discovered that it was a friend of someone else from the community who did it. LBP is an esport. Calling LBP speedrunning an esport simply comes from when RBG Jellyfish once ran LittleBigPlanet at a DreamHack event, which is known for holding esport tournaments, so this is mostly a joke. XX Sublime XX. The player who goes by this name is known to be the very first person who did speedruns of levels individually, with videos dating back to 2009. The runs feature very few strats and are significantly slower than today's runs. They also use some amusing costumes of well-known characters. Candlepants.org, a YouTube channel by the name of Candlepants.org, uploaded what is known to be the first video of the original Meerkat Kingdom skip, which involves walking behind the level to reach the end. The source video no longer exists as it's been removed from YouTube, as well as Candlepants seemingly disappearing from the internet as a whole, with only an archive of their website remaining. TAS 2008. Several years ago, a player named Ricky Pipe published a level titled TAS 2008. The level featured several obstacles that use many of the speedrunning tricks to clear. It's unknown why the level is titled this, as it has nothing to do with an actual TAS. Maybe back then the difficulty of the tricks almost required a TAS to do them. There isn't any real TAS of LittleBigPlanet, since the tools just aren't there yet for it. Original Segmented Run. Being created in 2011, the original LBP1 Segmented Run was the first speedrun of LittleBigPlanet that had been put together using individual recordings for each segment, where segmented runs usually try to get an idea of what the best possible time could be. The time came out to 1 hour, 1 minute and 25 seconds, which is relatively decent considering there weren't many skips in existence yet. Unfortunately, the original videos don't exist anymore, but in them, the main focus was described as trying to get as many flings and to conserve as much speed as possible. An archive exists of the original post though, and the original LBP2 segmented run also still exists on YouTube. Every Finnish runner is RBD's imaginary friend. This was a small inside joke started by RBD Jellyfish in the speedrunning server after saying, "Sometimes I wonder if all the Finnish friends I've met on the internet are imaginary." This mostly came about because of how a decent number of the top LBP runners are all from Finland, as well as a majority of RBD's Twitch viewers at the time, despite being American himself. PPJ deleted the speedrunning server. This was actually a prank played by PPJ to make users believe he was actually in the process of deleting the server, by slowly making channels private, making them disappear to regular users, as well as actually saying that he was thinking about doing it, with some people even agreeing. Patching skips during runs. Often when runners would fail some kind of trick or skip in their speedruns, the developers of the game, Media Molecule, would jokingly be blamed for patching the trick out of the game mid-run to have the player fail. Obviously in reality, the runner just failed themselves. This becomes even more amusing now that one of the runners, RBD Jellyfish, actually is a dev at Media Molecule. All skips were intentional. This simply theorizes that all of the skips within LittleBigPlanet speedrunning were actually intentionally created by the developers. There's pretty much nothing to support this, and is really just a silly joke. However though, some skips have been thought to be known or thought of by the developers due to their simplicity, such as the Dancer's Court skip, which uses the snake to easily make it up to a platform that directly leads to the scoreboard, skipping half the level, which is probably where this idea came from. 14-year speedruns. With the first LittleBigPlanet releasing in 2008, there's an idea that those who began playing it then, but never actually completed it, are to this day, still on the journey of completing a speedrun for the game, which at this point, has been going for 14 years long so far. All this is though is just a silly idea for a joke, and it's likely that nobody in this situation is going to return to knowingly complete their several year long speedrun. Unreleased SPM speedrunning guide. Throughout LBP speedrunning, there have been several guides created for many of the games which explain how to run them for players wanting to start. At some point, RBD Jellyfish considered making a guide for Sackboy's prehistoric moves as an April Fool's joke, since nobody even runs it anymore, and because of how short it is. This was known to almost nobody though, and was never actually created. And those are all of the topics that have been presented by myself and the LittleBigPlanet speedrunning community from throughout its history, that were thought to be intriguing, unusual, or mysterious enough to be explained here in the LittleBigPlanet speedrunning Iceberg. It was super interesting going through myself and learning so much about the community and many of its members, and the stories they all have, despite already being here for a while. Thank you to anyone who helped out with this process, especially Retro, RBD, Hoon, and Metroberry, who answered a few questions for me. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you want more, you can always join the community yourself through the Discord server linked in the description. See you next time.